I have a question for you guys. Why do we celebrate and worship these idols who have abandoned their arranged marriages and fatherhood? So Buddha was a prince, had a wife and a child who he abandoned as Siddhartha.
Yeah, I've thought about that too, Indy. You know, this idea that we're talking about, oh, this Buddha is he's so selfless. It's like, well, what about his family? You know, don't you think it's kind of selfish to like that's like the most narcissistic thing you do? Sorry, wife and kids, I'm gonna go abandon you so that I can find my own inner enlightenment. It's like, my God, that is so self-absorbed. Like, you got a family to take care of. Like, what about their needs? What about the things that they do? Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up there, Indy, with regards to these like figures like abandoning stuff. But I think a lot of that, it probably might be like more cultural, like conditioning and like brainwashing. Because one of the things about cults is they tell you that you need to abandon your family. You need to abandon all the family and friends that don't follow that belief system. So maybe on a subconscious level, what that's telling you is that in order to, become enlightened, you have to give up the things that you love, your family and your friends that make you who you are in the first place.
Yeah, and the priests are always celibate. So, like, what kind of a role model are these figures giving us to become a father, right? They show us how to be a child forever. We're the child of God. Can we grow up and become a man? Can we be a father? Can we have a wife?
That's another weird thing, too. Like, think about, like, all these priests, and like, these priests they're always referred to as like father or the father, yet they're never actually fathers. Isn't that weird? They never have, like, what?
But if you want to hear something really weird, like the Chinese history is based on a lot of flip-flops between really liberal and like really rigid, and they go back and forth. But when we look at the flip-flop before Jesus's time, they worshiped Baal, and at the Baal altars, they would have a naked female dancing around a pole, which was a tree, which represented the penis or the phallus. And then animals and babies would come to be sacrificed at the altar while she danced naked orgasmically around the pole, trying to conjure up the semen of Baal, which was the name for the rain that would come down to fertilize their crops. And so during this time, the temple priestesses were sex goddess priestesses, and the people would come there for sex to boost their fertility for the crops. And so the priests would impregnate young females that wanted to be impregnated by a priest, and it was a sex worshiping cult. And so that was then contested by the Christians. They wanted to change things 180 degrees from being a total orgy to celibacy. And so it's in one extreme to the other. And we see a lot of that when historical changes happen, they go from one extreme to the next. And when we're looking back on it now, we're thinking that's a bit extreme, but we fail to realize the other extreme before that, where there was orgiastic rites. And in the Bible, they consider that these Christmas trees are part of the altar for Asherah, the goddess of heaven, the mistress of Baal, the god of the sun. So in Deuteronomy, it says, the images of their gods you are to burn in the fire. Do not covet the silver and gold on them. Do not take it for yourselves, or you will be ensnared by it, for it is detestable to your Lord God. Do not bring a detestable thing like it into your house. Will be set apart for destruction. Regard it as vile and utterly detest it as a separate part of destruction. So these Christmas trees were considered to be an aspect of Asherah worship of the sex goddess, and considered to be idolatry. So in the Bible, in many parts of the Bible, in Jeremiah and Deuteronomy and other places, they say that the tree is very satanic, and it represents idolatry of a sex goddess.
That's very interesting, and I just want to respond to your question that you asked 5 minutes ago and to what Cosmic said.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start where he ended off just before your question was he was saying that he didn't see a conspiracy, right? And I don't think it's fair for us to say that when we look at history, the whole idea of Christianity as we know it was a conspiracy. It was a conspiracy that was constructed by the Roman politicians trying to stop a civil war between the Messianic Jews and the Jews that were following the Pharisees. And so there was fighting on the streets, like you were saying, to this day, violence, aggression, and they were worried that it was going to spark off into a civil war. So what they did was they banned the worship of Messianic Judaism, and they conspired together in secret to create a canonized Bible that was an accepted Bible that would be the norm for use of religion and they renamed the religion Christianity, which actually had nothing to do with the Judaic Messianic Jews, which was a Greek thing. And then they changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday so that the Pharisee Jews would accept that it was a new religion and not the other Judaism, which was the other form of Judaism, the Messianic Jews. So the whole basis of Christianity was started out of a conspiracy. And then the Roman Catholics, now this is where it gets interesting. They called their priests fathers and they initiated the celibacy, which was a Mithras practice. But in that time, if you were having engagements with a young boy, that was not considered a sexual act, right? For a man. According to ancient Greek law, if you had a young boy, you were not cheating on your wife.
The Greeks, I know the Romans did that.
Yes, exactly. So their idea of a priest didn't necessarily exclude young boys, but no woman. It was like a point of we've got to understand the time of when this was going on, and the idea of father, why priests are called father, was coming from, once again, Judaism. Abba is a title that was given to the priests, but you cannot become a Jewish priest unless you're married. By law, rabbinic law. You can only be a rabbi if you were married. So there's an interesting point. Yeshua was called a rabbi. According to that time that he was called a rabbi, he had to have been married, because it's written in the old law, only a married man can be a rabbi. So he must have been married before he was initiated into the law of the temple, which sort of fills a lot of gaps. And then getting to your question about the story of, now once again with Jesus, the story of Emmanuel was that he was the Lion of David, so he had the claim to the throne of Israel. We're calling it Israel, but those people, he had a claim to rule as a king because he came from a royal bloodline of David. That's what it says in the Bible, which means that his children had a claim to the throne, right? Now, he abjugated his seat to the throne in order to do his ministry of spiritual kinglyship, which means that his children must have been kept in the palace or the equivalents in order to be trained to become kings and queens, right? Buddha, we got the same story. In the Gautama, his family did not want to go and live in a cave with him. They wanted to live in the comfort of the palace, where his children would then be getting trained to become the next kings and queens. So it's interesting. I mean, it's not quite the same as abandoning your family when they are set up in a palace with like 50 servants, teachers, families, right? Your whole family's around them. And you're going to go off to live in a cave, but they are going to live in the lap of luxury until they become the next king or queen or whatever royal position they're going to fill. So it's it's not quite the same from our perspective, and I think the same can be said for Emmanuel. Although it is a very interesting point that you guys bring up, that these guys left their families behind. And I think the Christian church has taken on this Roman Catholic idea of the father has to be celibate. And so we've got all these charges against the Catholic churches and many of the other churches, right? A lot of unhappy children, many of them little boys that grew up dealing with trauma, which they wouldn't have had they not been in the church. So, there's a lot of this. There's a lot of interesting questions to point out here. I can see General Shinobi, you've got something on your mind.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm just looking on. I'm just looking something up on my computer. You carry on.
I dig that backdrop on the ceiling, by the way. It looks really funky.
What's that?
I dig your backdrop on the ceiling.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had to switch to my phone, which is kind of annoying because I've got loads of notes on my phone. But I had the laptop set up before and it kept cutting out. So, yeah. Oh well, it is what it is. Yeah, it's interesting that father sort of sounds very similar to further as well. Like we have fathers always seem to be further away than the mother, which is like kind of the matter, the mother, which we're in. That's the kind of container. But then the father is kind of it's kind of out, more kind of seen as out there or up there, or the sky father. It seems to be further away, rather than us being the father, if that makes sense. It's always seen as external rather than coming through us, whether it be priests or whoever.
I like that. And technically, the Aramaic, they used to say Baba, and that was the sacred mother. The Holy Spirit was considered the sacred mother earth within us. And so they changed that to Abba, because in Gematria, they're the same. They switched it to the father. And so the father is really distant, like you say. The mother is primary. It's so close to heart. It's within us. The mother is within us. And we've lost that teaching. But they still teach the old teachings in some spiritual practices, some spiritual centers, when they've learned the old ways of the mysticism are being brought back today. So the mother's always closer, especially in like Latin families. We see a lot of people from Mexico and Central America come up here to the States. It's always the men. They leave their wives back there and they send them money back to their kids and their wives. And sometimes they have another family here too. So, and then we have the Mormons, where the Mormons have many wives and one father. So there's only one father and there's all these mothers in a family. But the father tends to be distant, like you said, and the heavenly father is so far. The earthly mother is here, and then the moon is considered to be feminine, a mother, grandmother, is much closer than the sun. So, and also each person is inside of their mother for 9 months of their life. So that's how much closer can you get than that?
Yeah.
Right?
I heard as well that Saturn used to be feminine. I'm not sure if you guys have heard that.
Was there a goddess associated with it in particular?
I think so. I can't remember. I should have brought that up.
That I followed, all of the planets were originally goddesses, and the gods that we have today were not actually gods. They were the consorts of the goddesses initially.
See, I think also perhaps that just the flip, the inversion of it being from the goddess to the god, or the mother to the father, has made the gods further away from us, if that makes sense. That would make sense. That to make them more masculine has made them further away than us, rather than,
because they're really masking what's really there, and so it's really making things very distant behind the mask too.
Yeah, and I
Yes,
think
that's very
yeah.
interesting. I'm just going to add to that Lua was the goddess of Mesopotamia, and Lua was known as the companion of Saturn. So she was literally related to Saturn, and in the Akkadian, we've got Kajamanu or Kayamanu, and you see the word Manu there, which is a Vedic word, which represents the group soul, the oversoul. So I think all of the planets had poles. The sun used to be female, Venus used to be female, Venus used to be a male at one point. The lunar used to be the male, right? Used to be what's his name holding up the world?
Atlas.
Like, put your hands in the air like you just don't care. That's Atlas's story. And we look at all the planets, we find the same story. It's interesting. Please do carry on.
No, it's fine. Doesn't matter what I was gonna say. It's more that Saturn is now seen as kind of a more stern, kind of strong, like father, whereas before it was seen more of like a more as a kind of like a mother figure kind of thing. Now, like, people are made to kind of fear Saturn rather than it be a teacher for us.
It's interesting. Yeah. I wonder if it was like, because it's the black sun to many people, it was the black sun in old times. I wonder if the goddess was a dark one.
Well, black or dark is, I see it's more feminine. It's kind of like you have the light.
Serious.
Yeah, the light, which is the more masculine, like pointy, and then the black is more of like what you go into.
Okay.
So that would make sense if it was seen as the black sun. Because also I've heard that when you die, rather than going into the light, you're supposed to look behind you and go back into the black. Go back to black, as Amy Winehouse says.
That's what we used to do. We used to go in and through and then reemerge from the earth. But now they tell us we're supposed to go away.
Exactly, and go into the light, which it could be a trick of light. The light could be a trick. It's like you have one pole, which is the blinding white light, which is more of the kind of Luciferian, which is more of the kind of the kind of spirituality where it's kind of people telling you what stuff is, whereas the dark is kind of the innermost cave. It's kind of finding out for yourself in the depths. It's kind of the infinite potential, dark matter, dark waters.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And when we go back to so Ninurta is also a deity that represents Saturn. So before Babylon, so in Mesopotamia, they started to associate Saturn with Kajamanu and Kayamanu, which is like relating to the constant and was known as Udamuin Sagus, which is like the star of the sun. But in earlier times, it was known as Ninurta. And I think that comes from Sumer, from the late era of Sumerian Akkadian times. And so Ninurta is a goddess that represents Saturn. And here's a very interesting perspective of Saturn. Something changed in our perspective of Saturn, because the earlier depictions of Saturn is the green man. And the green man is considered to be the reaper. And the reaper always had the scythe, right? And the reaper was the one that would reap the sows of wheat, right? And barley. And so the wheat and the barley being reaped represented the earth plane, represented the abundance of physical security, and also the timing and understanding the constants of the clock and how the cycles worked was necessary to grow wheat, because you had to know when to plow the field, when to sow the seeds, what to do to look after these wheat plants, when to give them poo-poo, when to reap them, and then how to dry them, when to dry them, and how to store them in order to have an abundance of food. So I think that there's definitely this hey, dear brother Ronan, much love. Yeah, the directions in the world definitely brainwashed us, man, or try to. But yeah, there's this very interesting sort of relation here with Saturn being the green man, which was actually depicted in old times as a man coming out of a tree. And we can see these green man depictions all around the world, in Europe and different places. So, like, the idea of Saturn then is a very different idea to what we've been given in modern times. And the idea that Saturn represents the dark, that is a new thing. Saturn never represented the dark. Saturn represented the reaping of the wheat and the corn. Now, when do you reap your wheat and your corn? What time of year do you reap it?
Fall.
I know that certain crops you reap late in the year. Am I right? Barley. Is barley reaped before the end of the year? I believe barley is a late crop. And barley would have been what people were growing more than anything. When they spoke of wheat in the old day, they would have been talking of barley, wouldn't they? More often than not.
Yeah.
I think barley.
Back then, the gladiators lived off of bean and barley.
Yeah, I believe barley. When is barley reaped? Barley reaped.
Corn and cotton are harvested later in the season. Peas, raspberries, and grapes. Latest crops. Soybeans, sugar beets, grain sorghums. Grain sorghums, yeah.
So, like, okay, so barley is harvested in April or May. And in the Northern Hemisphere, typically July or August. So that's interesting. That's like the solar high, right, of the cycle. And then from that point on, the cycle starts to decrease, doesn't it? It's like the waning of the sun, because the sun's potency is 22nd of June. That's the longest day. After the 22nd of June is the days getting shorter. 21st of June is the longest day of the year. No? In the Northern Hemisphere. So it's very interesting when we look at this, because like I think there's this fundamental shift in the way that we perceive Saturn that came about at a later stage. And I think the Catholics have a big part to play in this. What do you guys think?
I just wanted to say that Santa Claus, or Father Christmas, used to be green, and he's a very Saturnian figure. Also, the green would be the heart chakra, which its symbol is the Star of David, like the two triangles, as above, so below. And also the heart would kind of be like the pole as well, because you have as you mentioned before, Franklin, we have 3 chakras above, 3 below, and then the heart is kind of like the pole. Also, it being the 4th chakra, the 4 is related to plasma. So you're saying that we have 3 chakras above, 3 below. They're kind of mirrors of each other, and then we have the heart in the middle, and it's green. There's just a correlation there between the green man, Saturn, Santa Claus used to be green, and the pole as well.
Interesting.
Sorry, I just had to share that. I was just making notes, like, oh yeah, it all fits.
Yeah, it does. Leprechauns used to be red, and they switched them to green. It's interesting how they flip flop the green and the red. It's like blood and vegetation.
Very interesting that like our icons were changed. Like Santa Claus's iconography was changed from green to red. That's quite telling, isn't it?
Yeah. Interestingly, like Saturn changed from like harvesting crops to sacrificing children, from green to red. Now, I think Saturn is considered to be the old sun. It was the sun, and then the Helios came in to replace it. But I think in the Bible, a lot of mentions of the sun was actually Saturn originally, but they replaced it with Helios.
I'm just gonna
interesting.
I'm gonna go have my dinner. I'll be back shortly if you guys are still here.
All right, we'll be here.
Enjoy your dinner, brother.
Dinner.
See you later. Much love. So yeah, I mean that's very interesting that you point out there the shift from Saturnial, because this is a very interesting perspective. And this really settles with me. Like in the Kabbalah, this is what I noticed when I was young. Like I was looking in a lot of ancient sources. And in these old sources, I noticed that Tiferet was related to Saturn. I was like, okay. And in all the more modern sources, like the 17 and the 1800s, Tiferet was starting to be related to the sun. And I was like, that's really fascinating. And at some point, Saturn was put into Hut, the head, right? At some ancient point as well. Then at a later stage, this was shifted once again. And Mercury was put into Hut, the head. And then Saturn was put into Bina. Bina representing the form. So I observed all of this and I was like, this is very strange, that we've sort of, the Saturn has danced around the tree of life quite extensively, but some of the old Kabbalists considered Saturn to be related to like a lot of these positions. And I think this is quite telling about what we're talking about here with the change of the colors of Santa Claus, right? Change of the colors. Like when did we start aligning Saturn with the color indigo? Because traditionally the color indigo, if we look at the Sumerians, lapis lazuli was related to Venus. She had a lapis wand, she had a lapis ring, she had a lapis necklace, she had lapis everything. She had to undress when she went into the underworld, remember? And all of her lapis lazuli things had to be kept. Didn't she even have a lapis sphere? I think she had a whole lot of lapis lazuli toys. And her color was indigo. So when you think of Venus, right? Listen to the word Venus. Veins. What color are veins?
Purple.
Yeah, the indigo.
Yeah.
When you look at your Venus in your arm, your intravenous, your Venus, they look indigo color. So, I can see exactly where we related our Venus and our veins and our, these elements to. And so Saturn seems okay. So if we look at the 7 rays as an extension of the cube, and we consider that there are 3 primary principles being expressed, which are essentially 3 primary colors. And these 3 primary colors represent energy, right? Thought, and taking form. So thought as in the purity of thought, energy as in the changing from thought to form process, energy. And so we've got the yellow, the blue, and the red color. And so we could say that the yellow represents energy because it's the most vibrant of all the colors. And it is what we see the sun as reflecting. And energy represents our heart, right? Our heart chakra, which is that go between the upper. So we spoke about like the heart being the center, between the 3 upper chakras and the 3 lower chakras. So the upper represents thought, right? The lower represents becoming form. And what stands between thought and form is energy in the middle, which is the heart. So the heart is always related to energy. And when we look at the Sastra chakra, we can relate it to pure thought. And when we look at the Svadhisthana chakra, which is where birth happens, that's where form comes from. So the red principle would be related to passion, the passing of ions. And it's the passing of ions in the woman's womb that creates a new being to grow. From new ions, the molecules can assemble themselves within the womb. So it relates to that principle of cause and effect. And the energy of the heart relates to as above, so below, that principle of polarity, because energy is always between 2 poles. That's what energy does. It's a reflection of polarity. And thought is a reflection of the mentalist sphere, the space of the mental realm, thought. So we've got these 3 fundamental principles. And from these 3 fundamental principles, we then have the principle of vibration coming into being. And vibration is what happened when thought mixes with form, the principle of form. But there's more thought than there is form. So 2 parts thought, 1 part form. 2 parts blue, 1 part red makes indigo, sound, vibration, Venus. And so here we have the beginning of the vibration. First, there was the word, right? And the word was only brought in to alignment because of the grounding effects of Mercury. Now, Mercury, interestingly enough, was the one that was able to touch both the physical and the divine. So the physical was touched because of the red, the physical, and the yellow, because it's pure energy, was able to touch thought. So the yellow and the red then become orange, saffron, right? Which represents Mercury, the principle of quantum entanglement, which is reflecting the correspondences between things, the second principle of Hermes, which is what holds intact the vibrational sphere of Venus, keeping the Venus vibrations of sound to manifest the energy of the heart, which is yellow. And then when we look at this, we see the reflections of Saturn, in order to become rhythmically tuned, had to take an interesting perspective. They needed the energy of the yellow, right, of the heart, but they needed the passion and desire of the red, which brings about form. And so when you mix yellow and red, you get green. And so green then can represent, namaste, Jennifer. How are you doing? Sending you big love. Happy solstice. And the combination between the heart presence and the svadhisthana, the desire, passion, desire principle of Mars, then yellow plus red becomes green, the principle of the solar fire. Hey?
Are you combining different light, or because yellow and red makes orange usually, unless you're talking about light?
Sorry, did I say yellow and red? Yellow and blue. Sorry. I don't know why I'm saying that, because you're looking at the yellow, the energy, and the law that holds Saturn's position in place. So I don't know why my brain did that. So the law of blue, which is where all of the principles of the mental sphere, which is going to govern all the other principles throughout the whole tree of life, then gets reflected down to the energetic state, which then becomes the major former, because who is working in the principle of Svadhisthana is this Saturnian presence, which represents the second sun. So the solar plexus is the home of Saturn, which is interesting because it represents that part of our body which creates form, that part of our body that when you eat food, right? So the number 8, what he ate, what she ate, is related to your solar plexus, right? It's the desire to eat. And so the number 8 represents Saturn because it's about what has been eaten. So when we look at that power of the solar fire, it represents that ability to create form, which is what Saturn is doing. Saturn is creating form and holding all the rules and projecting that down into the sacral plexus in order for the body to form. And so Saturn controls all of the rhythms of all of the vibrational fields so that the energy can become matter. And this is all happening in the red sphere. So it's not that Saturn is coming from the red sphere, he's projecting into the red sphere. And the red sphere then becomes the perfect union with mind or thought and the physical form of the etheric body, then combine to become the purple. And so purple then represents sexuality, right? Which is generation between the masculine and the feminine, the red and the blue coming together. And so that violet purple color then would be projecting down into our what in the Kabbalah is called the Yeshut center, which is your sexual grounding positioning of all of these energies, which relates to where the actual organs are. So that's a very interesting perspective. But when we look at Saturn, Saturn's like right in the center of the tree. It's the center of the thing. It's where all of the rhythms of the body are controlled. So the metabolism of the body is maintained by the rhythm of Saturn. And so what you eat is what you've eaten, what one ate. 8, the number 8, is what's going to dictate how fast your metabolic rate moves according to what you put into that tank. And that then is going to generate all of the rhythms of metabolism throughout all of your systems are going to be maintained according to the body temperature as it's retaining the necessary rhythms to be able to reflect the vibrational frequencies of consciousness down into the physical body, down into the sacral plexus, so that it can become a cause and effect scenario in the physical body, is all governed by Saturn. Saturn plays probably one of the biggest roles. And this is why if we look at the Manipura chakra, it means mani, means gem, and pura means all. Pura is everything. So it's sort of like the all-encompassing gem, the gem that reflects all of it out of it. So there's this very important, Pura isn't mentioned in the other chakra names. Pura is it means everything. Literally, it means everything, all of it. So Manipura then becomes one of the most important. And so we speak of this as being the center of self-expression, which is quite interesting. The self-expression is where the passions find their fire, is in the solar fire. And these passions of the solar fire then get channeled into the sacral plexus to become the desires. And that desire is what causes the bonding on molecular levels, so that the molecules can bond for babies to form. And that's why desire between a man and a woman is required to project the passion of the solar fire, which is actually Saturn, because the solar plexus is called the solar plexus, but it has very little to do with the sun. From all of our occult practices, we speak of the heart being the center of the sun, solar power. So the solar power moves through the heart, which is the prana, as they speak of it, and Surya Bhagwan in Vedic cosmology, is essentially governed by the lungs, the heart, and we are breathing in this pranic field, which is coming out of the sun, which is that life source of energy, which basically keeps us all flowing in a living sort of consciousness-based zone. So I think there's a lot to be looked at when we look at this color green. and why Santa Claus was green. Why did we turn it red? Because red is about desire. They wanted us to change the way that we relate to these ideas. They didn't want us to think of it as being an emissary, bringing the pure mental field of the law down to make it become physical. They wanted us to think of what our desires can do, like what gifts do you desire? So they wanted us to think of Santa Claus as like, ooh, what am I going to get? What's coming for me? Welcome back, dear Shinobi. How was your supper?
Very good. Yeah, my partner's an amazing cook.
Ooh la la, you lucky man.
Yeah, earlier I forgot to mention Anubis when we were talking about Saturn and like the abyss and the black sun, because Anu was another name for Saturn. And when I hear the name Anubis, it makes me think of like Anu, Saturn, and the abyss. And Anubis is black. It's a black-headed jackal, and he weighs the soul. He weighs the heart against a feather. And it reminds me a lot of Saturn, because Saturn's known as the planet of karma. But what I think that Anubis is, it's inside us. Like when we die, we don't go outwards, we go more inwards. Because if you go in, you go out, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to bring in a correlation between Saturn and Anubis and karma and weighing the heart and the feather.
Very interesting, that connection there. Saturn was like so fundamental in all of the ancient perspectives as a planetary force. And I've heard stories now I'm going to I'm going to put this out there. I don't know if it's true, but I'm going to mention it just for the sake of putting it out there. My perspective on it is I'm undecided, but what I say is this, and this is very interesting. One of the ideas is that Jupiter came here on a journey, that the Earth arrived here on a journey, that there are galaxies swallowing up other galaxies, that there are constellations eating up other constellations. What a concept. So, and you probably find there's information about this on the web somewhere, that Jupiter had been coming here from a distant place in the galaxy, and it was coming towards, who is it that's eating up who? I think it's the Milky Way, right? Is the Milky Way devouring the constellation of Sagittarius? Is that what it is? Something along those lines. It's just a very interesting concept that many of the planets have journeyed here from a long way, and that we are in a sort of a nexus point between different constellation zones. And that you'll find that because of where we are, things get locked into this orbit of where we are. And it's an interesting idea. Yeah, there's something fascinating. It's almost like we're at a nexus point of gravity between different galaxies colliding. And because of that, our constellations are being shaped and driven the way they are. And that there's this traffic. And do you remember a little while ago, there was a big scare that there was something big arriving at Earth? Do you guys remember this? It was a couple of years ago. Was it 2 or 3 years ago? There was like a big thing being seen. And first they said it was a dwarf star. Do you remember? And then they were saying, no, it's a planet. and the physicists couldn't quite put their finger on what it was. It was approaching our solar system, and people started seeing it and saying, like, what is that? And there was huge discussions about what this was. It was a number of years ago, and I don't know what happened to that. Did you guys follow that? Did you hear about that?
I didn't know. But I've just checked because I thought there was a black hole in the middle of our solar system and not the sun. And apparently the black hole is called Sagittarius A.
Oh.
It's interesting you mentioned Sagittarius being eaten up because the black hole in the middle of our galaxy is called Sagittarius.
Wow.
And then there you have the sun and then the black hole, the kind of masculine and feminine. We're told it's the sun, but actually I think it's a black hole. Everything's going into the black hole.
But, you guys remember a few years ago there was that object that was approaching us called Numa Numa, and it curved around and made a sharp turn and left. That was an anomalous object. They didn't know what that was. But they've been looking to account for some gravitational anomaly in our solar system that's unaccounted for. And they've recently found what they consider to be the trans-Neptunian objects. They're also known as dwarf planets. There's a host of dwarf planets that they found. They don't orbit on the same planet plane that the regular planets orbit on, but Pluto and the rest of the dwarf planets orbit on a different plane. And they think that plane may be the plane of the dwarf star, and that when it sweeps through, it captures moons and moves them onto a different plane. But Nibiru was discovered in 1991, and then
please continue.
In 1991, they discovered the dark star, the binary star to our sun, Nibiru, and they retracted it soon afterwards because it could ensue a lot of panic.
I remember hearing about this long time, like many years ago, and there was like a big discussion. So I'm looking at this, and the Sagittarius being devoured by the Milky Way theory refers to the ongoing process where the Milky Way galaxy is gravitationally pulling apart and consuming the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy, a smaller neighboring galaxy, leaving behind streams of stars as evidence of this galactic cannibalism.
See right now, there's a couple of galaxies that are engulfing each other. You can see.
Happy solstice. Happy solstice to the little one.
Hey.
That's Orion.
Is his name Orion? Orion.
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 Oh, that's so cool. You heard his name.
Orien. Say hi.
Hey, Orion.
Hello, Orion.
That's Franklin. That's Indy, and that's Franklin.
Happy solstice. Hope you're having a happy holiday.
Holidays.
This is such an interesting, lovely name, by the way. Yeah. Lovely, powerful name.
Thank you.
The name of a soldier, name of a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got the name of a warrior. Sorry.
You got a big set of shoes to fill there. You're gonna have to start training. But that's fascinating. You know, this whole idea of this Sagittarius dwarf galaxy being basically consumed by the Milky Way, and guess who's in the direct line of. Guess how this is? It's happening past us. We are sitting between the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy and between the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is eating up this galaxy and the gravitational force. So that other planet that we saw that you mentioned, Indy, was it was coming from Sagittarius dwarf galaxy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whatever that heavenly body was, and there's a lot of traffic. So the idea is that Saturn was here originally. And Saturn is indigenous, and that Jupiter was journeying through and said, hey, you know what? I like this. I'm going to set up shop. I thought, oh, Saturn, you got a good spot. Yeah, there's a spot for me. And sort of a lot of our planets have come and set up shop here on the journey. So a lot of these planets come from. Imagine why Jupiter has this association with Sagittarius for a moment. It's an interesting concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, and so Jupiter arrived here and was sort of like an important part. And why Jupiter is so different, right? As a planet.
Yeah, I know Saturn still shows signs of having been a star. It emits light, infrared, visible, and UV from its poles, as well as microwaves. It emits microwaves from its poles. So those are signs that it's the remnants of a brown dwarf star. I thought Jupiter might be similar, but Jupiter seems to be similar in the fact that it's a gas giant, but it doesn't seem to have those that light emitting from its poles like Saturn did.
I've heard theories that say that Jupiter could one day become a sun.
Okay, that makes sense. I could see that.
Like it's an infant.
Much more active.
Saturn is an old man.
Yeah.
Like I was a son back in the good old days. Back in the good old days, you know, I can remember the days when I was a son and like, oh, get me a walking stick out, you know. There's something interesting to that idea, and I think our knowledge and understanding of the Namaste, dear Lauren. How are you, Lauren? I'm sending you big love and big blessings.
Do you guys know
what was that?
Lauren, sorry to interrupt. Do you guys know about the rings of Saturn being anomalous, and that the rings are always changing? Some of the rings disappear, other rings will emerge. There's a point where the rings end and begin. That's somewhat anomalous, and the width of the ring changes from 600 miles wide to now it's smaller. So there's somebody that's got a conspiracy theory that the rings of Saturn are actually a craft that is creating the rings. Electromagnetic drone.
What an interesting concept.
Yeah, it is a strange concept. But the thing is that the fact that the rings are so anomalous and that they change their shapes and that they change their width of their bands is very anomalous. But he says that the craft is on the A side on the outer ring, and that it reflects back across the Cassini gap in the middle, and then it comes into the second ring. It moves in a pattern.
I've heard that the rings are made of quartz crystal and that they expand beyond the Earth, and that's how Saturn affects the time here, because in watches there's quartz crystals as well.
Yeah. And also it's said that we're connected to Saturn electrically, that lightning comes across space from Saturn to here.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, we've been seeing more transluminous events, the TLEs. I saw a really good picture of some red sprites the other day. They look very strange. These strange transient luminous events look really cool. They've got different ones. They've got sprites, elves. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can see now. And they think that it's influenced by Saturn because we already know that the planets influence our astrology, that they have dramatic influence on our person for each individual, but they also seem to impact our planet electrically, and their gravitation has a big impact on us as well, obviously. What
are the sprites that you've been seeing? What are they?
Red sprites. If you look up red sprites or TLEs. They look like kind of a ghost with like red tails coming off of it.
I've been seeing dragons in the sky, like cloud formations, but to me they're the same. They're still the essence of dragons coming back.
I feel like
some really cool photos as well.
Smoking fire Maybe they make their own clouds to travel in. I wouldn't put it past them. I feel like low flying clouds that move fast is just a herd of dragons. I also feel that dragons are able to camouflage themselves and mask themselves, and also possibly influence the minds of others through telepathy, changing our awareness and our attention.
Oh, these sprites are cool.
Aren't those amazing?
Very eerie.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of like nerve endings or something. It's like we're in a brain.
Yeah, it does. It looks like a neuron, like the axis
Yeah.
of a neuron. Those electrical charges coming off the end.
There's definitely something interesting in that. Though I think that water plays a big role in lightning.
Oh, true.
Because it's like the clouds being composed of water causes the positive and negative ions to move apart. And so, am I right? The negative ions go to the top of the cloud and the positive ions come to the bottom of the cloud. And they create a polarity, a potential. And the bigger the movement apart of those ions, the more potential they create. And then, is the Earth negatively ionized? Is that correct? And it creates a relationship between the ionic field of the Earth and the bottom ionic field within the clouds that produce this current, which then obviously jump from both the ionic field of the Earth towards that potential as that potential jumps towards the Earth. Is that right? Did I get the positive and negative right? I think that's right. Lightning ions diagram cloud.
The inner Earth is positively charged.
Considered negative ionic charge compared to the atmosphere.
What, the Earth, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the negative ions of the Earth react with the positive ions in the clouds that get pushed down, which is then what you get is this. You get a positive ion between a negative ion and a negative ion. Does that make sense? And that creates this chain reaction of ionic field. And then what we hear as thunder is when the electric charge is so powerful that space collapses. What a concept. So space collapses. That's the cracking sound of thunder, is a vacuum being created by the electric charge, like the tube. Is that like almost like a kind of a portal being created?
Sounds like it.
That vacuum, that collapsing sound, which is the thunder, which is accompanied with a huge charge of electrical connecting the negative, positive, negative ionic fields within the cloud. So like the clouds play a huge role in separating those ionic fields, and probably because the clouds are moving and the static of the water are being rubbed by the atmosphere.
That's amazing. I've had a vision of being drawn by the lightning into a portal. I was pulled up the lightning bolt and was brought into a portal in a vision I had one time. I thought to myself, maybe they're trying to keep us away from this lightning. Maybe it's really not as dangerous as it seems. But no, I do know people that have been struck by lightning, and I do know that it is very damaging.
I've known people that have been struck by lightning numerous times.
Me too. I know somebody that got struck by lightning twice in the same place.
I know, somebody who was struck by lightning twice, and his grandfather was struck by lightning 3 times.
Are they shaky?
I don't know. Don't think so.
My brother was electrocuted. He got shaky.
I never knew his grandfather, but his grandfather might have been a bit shaky, like in older age. But that's not unusual,
Yeah.
Our nervous system.
that got struck by lightning that could turn on a microwave with their nipples. Or charge a light bulb with their teeth.
That's interesting because I was electrocuted as a child.
Yeah.
And I got stuck in the mains for like a long time back before they had small holes. In those days, they had big holes in the wall plugs. Yeah. They had these massive plugs back in the good old days. The good old days weren't so safe for kids. So I got literally stuck with my fingers in the wall, you know, and for a long, long time until it blew up the whole power station. You got these sub power stations. There was one like 100 meters from our house. It blew up, caught fire. The neighbor's house almost burnt down because of it.
Jeez.
So, you know, obviously the charge was the feedback loop. But
Save your life.
interestingly, so that's the equivalent of a lot of lightning, right?
Yeah.
I was taking 240 volts of 50 hertz. How many amps is it? What is it, like 40 amps? What is the power? What is it? South African power? 40 amps? I think it's 40 amps.
Now, what does the amperage do compared to the voltage?
Well, the amps, so you've got your volts, right?
Yeah.
Your volt is just how fast it's moving.
Okay.
And your amps is how much is moving.
Yeah.
So your volts is moving like that, and each of those things is carrying a certain charge of amps. And so that creates watts. So that means that if you're running 40 amps at 240 volts, that's 240 times 40, right? So what's 40 times 240? That's 2,400 times 4, which is about 9,400 or something, whatever it is. It's less than 10 kilowatts coming out of the wall, right?
Okay.
So I was basically taking 10 kilowatts for about 10 seconds.
Oh, man. Good thing he broke out of there. My brother, he got shocked and he came back. His hair was sticking up. It had been over an hour. We don't know how long he was connected to the plug, but I imagine he just got shocked and had passed out right afterwards.
And he was still okay afterwards?
He was shaky for the rest of his life. He couldn't roll joints afterwards. He still did it, but it's hard.
That's hectic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've always had super steady hands. So, you know, I don't know. That's interesting. My hands always been super steady.
Maybe because you're so grounded, that's why it didn't. That's why you were okay afterwards.
I was 4 years old.
Yes, your spirit, maybe. You know.
Honestly, I could smell my brains burning.
Ooh.
Every time I wasn't in my body. I was outside of my body.
Man, you've been through a lot, Franklin.
But I was conscious of the experience. And I kept realizing, like, this isn't good. This isn't right. And I'd go back into my body, and every time I forced myself back into my body, I was like, and I'd jump out of my body, and I'd be, what am I going to do? I can't do anything. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go in my body. I'm going to pull my hands. And I go back in my body. I just jump out of my body. And I was like sitting next to my body trying to figure out, how am I going to fix this? And I got really angry. I got really, really, really angry because I'd been tricked into sticking my fingers in the wall, right? Somebody had told me to stick my fingers in the wall.
God.
Not someone physical.
Yeah.
The same somebody that told me to jump in my swimming pool when I couldn't swim. Well, to lean forward and try and take my boat when I knew I couldn't get it. So whoever this being was had convinced me that, no, you should stick your fingers in there. You're going to be okay.
Oh, man.
And I was like, no, I was told I mustn't. They were like, come on, man. gonna be fine. Stick your fingers in there. So I stuck my fingers in there. And I got so angry because I'd been tricked that I decided that I was going to jump into my body and I was going to scream as loud as I could down that electrical line. Because when I jumped in my body, I could see this line coming into my body, right? But I couldn't do anything about it. So I literally jumped into my body, and as I jumped in, I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could in my mind. I screamed at the energy coming at me. And when I screamed at it, I heard a loud popping sound in my head. And that popping sound in my head then was followed by an explosion outside at the same time.
Wow.
So I got into my body and I screamed down that line, and I felt this something coming out of me and meeting that electricity and like forcing it backwards. Yeah. And I couldn't do it the first time. I had to try it a few times. This took long. I went in and out of my body about like 10, 12 times, and I couldn't do it. And I had to get really angry. So angry that when I jumped into my body, the anger made it happen, right? It overrode what was going on in my body. And that angry scream ran down that line, and it was like a popping sound, like everything had popped, and I was suddenly free. And then I heard an explosion. That very second, I heard an explosion outside where the sub power station had an electrical surge overload and it exploded, caught fire. So I always had believed that I had caused that fire. And I was like really scared that people were going to knew that I like, oh, what if they know it was me?
It's like Carrie.
And I was like scared of it. I was like, oh, damn, what am I going to do? And like, I mustn't say anything about this. I must just be quiet about it. I mustn't tell anyone. And then, of course, the fire brigade had to come because like it was the houses on our block. Like the fire had spread into the property. I think someone's garage had caught fire. Luckily, their house hadn't burnt, you know, but there was like a garage and maybe a shed that had started to burn on their property because the fire of that big explosion had started to spread. And so the fire brigade came like really fast and put out all the fires, and there was no electricity for a couple of days. They worked on replacing the circuitry for like 2 days, or like a day and that was in the evening that happened. And the next day they were working all day, and then the electricity was on. That must have come on maybe that night or the next day. I don't know. I was a child. I went to sleep early, but anyway, I always believed it was my fault and that I had screamed down that power line to make that electricity stop. And that's, you know, the coincidence of the time was too much to be ignored. Because literally the moment I screamed, the popping sound in my head, and then immediately after that, an explosion. Like I heard a physical explosion. Like it was loud, man. It was like a bomb had gone off.
I feel like it might have been a blessing in disguise. As much as you might feel guilty for that fire that it created, it could have saved your life. I feel like you blew that thing up with your mind. The only way out for you. You knew had a greater purpose. Your future self might like to help you.
So yeah, I felt really weird about that whole thing. I was like a bit freaked out. But I thought that I had brain damage about that because of that. Because I could smell every time I came into my body, I could smell my brain burning. I could smell like a cooking smelling in my brain. And I was like, my brain's cooking. I was so conscious of the smell. Every time I came in, I was like, and then I couldn't do anything. And then when I came out of my body, I remembered smelling that smell of my brain cooking. Like I'm cooking, you know, my body was cooking. What a weird concept.
It's crazy how some people like just anything can happen to them and they don't die.
Yeah.
Like that. And some people they'll just trip over and then they'll be gone.
I think fear has a big thing to do with it. They see that people who get shot, they tell them you don't have to die just because you were shot. They die because they think they have to die. But if you have a strong will to live, you'll be able to get through almost anything.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, mind over matter.
Yeah.
I've fallen asleep in the sea a couple of times under waves. Literally fallen asleep. Because I was telling my little boy today, I was showing him, when I was your age, I used to ride waves that big. I was showing him, it's like the size of the lampposts. His eyes went big. I said, I was your age. I was 100 meters out to sea and I was riding waves that big. And like, he couldn't believe it. We're talking like 4-meter waves, man. Like, these are huge waves, man. And I would go and ride these waves. And if you got stuck in the Landadno normally has 2-meter waves on a good day. But on like spring tides and special tides, when the wind is right, it could go 3 meters. It could go 3 to 4 meters, right? Because the wind would barrel that waves up when it came down the mountain, and they would double in size. They would go from 2 meters to 3 meters to 3-4 meters. And I remember going out to ride these waves, and the surfers were too scared to go out. They were standing on the beach. And I'd be teasing them, saying, you guys are scared. Nah. And then I'd be like going out with my boogie board. I'm like 8 years old. And they're shouting at me like, no, come back. No. But they don't want to come in to fetch me because like the sea was crazy. I was like wild when I was 8, 9 years old, man. I was like off this planet wild. So I think that what you say is true. It's like I've walked through a buffalo stampede. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't survive that. Like if you've ever seen a buffalo stampede, it's the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life. It's a wall of dust coming at you and the whole earth is shaking. Like literally, it feels like an earthquake.
Yeah.
Because there's so many buffalo feet kicking the earth as they run. And you just see them coming at you. And you can, when you're in the dust cloud, all you see is horns. All you see is horns coming past you, and you're like, so I've been very lucky in my life to have survived a lot of things. But I think you're completely right that if you're afraid, that's what does it. Yep. If you're not afraid, then there've been a lot of other times I shouldn't have been alive when people came at me with knives and sickles and like gangs of people and groups of people, and supernatural things would keep me alive. I would become so physically strong that people would run away.
I think they can go really far. Like the people that can get bit by snakes and it doesn't hurt them, like Wim Hof did that, and other things. He probably, I think he took in some disease that could have been fatal and it didn't affect him. But I feel like when you have that fearlessness, things that would normally hurt other people can strengthen you. And I feel like if in your mind you interpret something as hurting you, it will. And in your mind, if you interpret something as strengthening you, it will as well. So I feel like that your mind is a place where that the body makes that synthesis happen. Because when you can see things as a blessing in disguise, or as it's making you stronger, whereas other people might see, oh, that ruined me and now I'm broken. Your attitude goes a long way and your intentions go a long way. When you're telling yourself that I just need to heal from this and I'm going to become stronger afterwards, your body's then creating that process for you, I feel like. And I feel like this is with a lot of things. If you believe that you can't walk or you believe that you can't heal, it's going to be very hard for your body to do it. But if you can believe that you'll heal and you can walk or you can overcome blindness, they think that mushrooms can have a big part in this. If you take psychedelic mushrooms, you can transform your nervous system. It can make changes in your nervous system. And they've seen people overcome deafness and stutters from mushrooms.
That's very interesting when you talk about transforming the nervous system. I think there's a lot to this. Mm-hmm. I think this is what the Krystos Oil is all about. Reshaping the way in which the mind processes information. And you're right. Like the attitude is everything, you know.
Yeah.
There've been like I almost passed away in India from some like cerebral disease, cerebral malaria, whatever it was, right? And I wasn't afraid of passing. I wasn't afraid. I was like, nah, I'm not going to hospital. Forget it. Like my ex-wife got really scared. She was like, dude, you can't walk, you can't crawl. I was like, never mind. Like, it's not my time. Like, I can handle this.
People don't get
And
it.
so I handled it. And instead of passing away, like the shape of my forehead changed.
Whoa.
I'm telling you, the shape of my face changed because the swelling in your brain is so hectic, right? But it made my brain bigger.
Cool.
Because these bumps here never used to be so prominent. And I got this serious like thing where like the agony is like the worst agony you've ever felt. And I kept trying to escape from my body, and I was like at the ceiling trying to find a way out. And I'd catch myself and go, no. You go in and you're gonna finish this, buddy. You get back in there and you fight. So I get back in my body and it's like, oh no. And the agony was just so bad. And I kept finding myself trying to like, oh, go on. Just let it go. Just go out of your body and just go. And I kept catching myself and going, no. I'm not falling for this trick. Back in. Like commanding myself back into my body. Get in there, buddy. And so there's that attitude that like I will not submit, right, to failure, or I will not lose. That keeps you alive. So I think this is why competition is healthy. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think so too. I also feel like maybe people that are like comfort seeking, that don't want to go through discomforts, I think those people will be the ones to choose fear in a situation like that and maybe want to escape. Whereas people like myself, I like to endure challenges, and I will go through strengthening, like hurting myself at the gym or something, working out hard or something. I'll go through that. I'll work out until it hurts, and I like that because it shows me that I've reached my limit. I try to go a little bit further. Next time I'm gonna be able to go further and further. People who can't reach their limit gets smaller and smaller over time. So people like myself that are interested in going into conditioning and things where it might be damaging, it might be hard to get through, but it's going to strengthen you. I feel like people like myself would probably seek thrill-seeking things because the danger's not really that threatening. It's more like I'm learning to be more agile, for example. I don't know. I think part of it comes from my attitude of being a naive optimist. I just see the positive sides of everything, which can be debilitating in some ways sometimes, but it leads me into interesting places.
Yeah, man, I can relate to that. What were you going to say, Shinobi, brother?
Oh, I was going to say that. Yeah, I'm sort of an optimist as well, but I'm what's the word? Because of PTSD, I've got like hypervigilance. So I'm hyper aware of stuff, like on the world stage, for example, just little things, and I see things other people don't. Like for example, walking through town, I'll spot little drug deals and stuff. And very aware, but so I'm good at spotting danger, but I would say I'm an optimist as well. If that makes sense.
I think it does because it's like you see where the safety's at. You're like, all right, there might be how we're gonna get out of it. You know what I mean? Whereas other people walk into it blindly and they're like, oh no, what do we do now?
Yeah, and I think that's good because especially like with people who are like in the conspiracy theorist world and stuff, and all doing this research, you can kind of get, people call it black pilled, where you like look too deep into stuff. You're like, oh, everything's bad, but I think you've got to have that optimism to see, yeah, there's a problem, but let's come up with a solution. Because lots of people stop at the problem, especially if you mention a problem to somebody, because you've got to start with the problem. Like you've got to say, yeah, this is fucked, or that's wrong. And sometimes people just stop there. They're like, oh, I don't want to hear this, I don't want to hear that. But it's like, hang on, wait, let's talk about this and see how we can resolve it. Because it's not all doom and gloom. There's, you know, so I think it's good to have balance of being optimistic, but also seeing what the boundary is, or the problem, or the danger. But you've got to know the danger to have the solution.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I feel like you could be optimistic on the sidelines your whole life and things are easy. But when you're being optimistic in action, it takes on a new form. And I think people that are naive optimists, they're so optimistic, they don't really see any room for growth. They don't really see any room for improvement. So it's hard to prepare for things as a naive optimist. I struggle with that. But I tend to not see the dangers within is the problem. Seeing dangers without and being able to cope with situations is something I've always been really good at, like you said. Like if I see a situation, I can come up with a solution. Whereas other people don't even notice the situations, you know? So oh, is that his son pop in right there?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's cool. But no, I think that's a big part of it. If you have the optimism, it's more easier to confront dangerous situations because you're not overwhelmed by it. Whereas other people will be like, all right, we just need to go. I don't even want to think about how to deal with it.
Yeah, so some people have cognitive dissonance, I think it's called, where you don't want to know what the danger is, because you probably haven't dealt with stuff in your own head. You're like, no, like I'm gonna just avoid that. If I look away, it's not there. I'm trying to think of the correct word, but
yeah, I know. And that they'll see somebody like that person's got problems. Like, let's stay away from them. And I'm like a therapist, so I'm like, oh, I wonder what their problems are. Maybe I should talk to them.
Yeah,
they're going over their head, you know. It's like I could help them, man. But I think some people know that there's certain people that are going to be a problem for them. They don't know how to cope with their approach, and they need to avoid them, especially for women or something.
Yeah, you guys are bringing up. Sorry, yeah.
No, sorry. Carry on. I can wait. It's fine.
I was just going to say, you guys are bringing up interesting points. I don't think everybody was meant to face adversity, or let's put it this way: like some people were born to be able to go through conspiracy theories and look at all of that dark stuff because it's in our nature to be optimistic. But if it's not in your nature to be optimistic, you were not made for that crap. It's not for everybody. Not everybody was meant to be an activist. Some people were born to be activists, and we've got like an optimistic, like fighting spirit that like okay, so that's what's the deal. How can we circumvent it?
Right.
Please do continue.
Yeah, I was just going to mention it'd be good to talk about leaders and like what makes a good leader, because the world is seriously lacking in positive role models. I mean, you've got the Avengers on the stage at the moment, haven't you? Like the sheer ridiculousness of it. And what's funny is that the kids have been conditioned into this, like with like superheroes wearing pants on the outside, like, and the whole ridiculousness of it. And now you have the literal Avengers on the world stage, and it's like I'm not sure what's going on. I think it's like they're trying to make reality seem like a virtual reality, like it's not real, like it's almost real, like it's so fake it's not quite real, so that they can kind of usher in a new reality, like a metaverse or something like that. First, they've got to kind of like make this realm seem as like mad as possible, just so people think that what they're going to bring in is actually normal. It's crazy.
I think that what we look for in a leader has a lot to do with what we see in ourselves. We want somebody to finish the job that we start. So I think it's different for everyone, and they play on that when they use politics against us, which is a charade of puppetry, where there's a real world banking system that's controlling the events and the government and the supposed wars that we have, that they're orchestrating these events. I feel like when somebody wants to help others, firstly, they might choose to be on the blue side. When someone wants to help themselves first and they want to keep what they have because they've worked so hard and they don't want to give it away to these lazy people that have brought them down all the way along, they choose a red side. And so, there's a lot of other people that choose different types of leaders. Like, I personally want to see a little bit of both sides. I want to be able to maintain what I've achieved, but I also want to be able to help others to a degree. But I want to help them in a way where I'm not giving them free giveaways. I want to help them learn how to fish. I don't want to give fish away to people. You know what I mean? I want to take time out of my day to help people learn how to fish, give my time and energy. And so, there's not many people in that boat, but there's a few of us out there. There's other people that want different kinds of leaders. There's people that want evil leaders, and people that want to go destroy things. People who want power to take over the world. So, that's because they want to take over the world, I would think. You know what I mean? But to a degree, there's an element of humility and empathy that we're going to need in a leader, that they can relate to us, that we can see themselves in them, and that they're not too high on themselves where they're going to kind of piss us off. So, but at the same time, we want them to be kind of bright and well-spoken and kind of outgoing, not kind of nervous and quiet. So it's kind of a combination of things where they're humble, but yet they're well outspoken. So I think that'd be good to see in a leader, but I don't know if that's a shared thing or not, but I believe it is.
I think you're completely right about the humanitarian element, because they have to have that Aquarian placement, right? Like Aquarius represents how we relate to the outside world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's that feminine pole of Saturn that is looking like getting feedback from the world, from the people. And so that is like, it's a big part. And I think it's on one hand, it's humanitarian potentially, because that's where Aquarius leads into Pisces, becomes humanitarian. Pisces is like the selflessness. So that Aquarian energy's got to be looking at Pisces, but it's also got to be getting something from Capricorn, something very careful and something very clear. And which is quite fascinating if you look at it. Like the selfless nature is one element of it. The other is also relating to a certain amount of courage, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out and to put yourself out into a position where you're putting your head above the turret. But in this day and age, I think in a normal world, courage wouldn't necessarily be so much of a big deal. But because of the world we're living in, it takes a lot of courage, I think. But most importantly, I think as well, which is another element to what you're talking about with humanitarianism, is also that you want to serve people, but also that you see, a leader can't have their own thoughts, right? So that selflessness has got to extend to even beyond the thoughts. Like, namaste, dear, my cherry, it's been a while. How are you? Much love. But yeah, like the other aspect of it is got to do with, if you're sitting in a circle of people, are your ideas the important ideas to you, or do you want to get everybody's ideas? And if that makes sense, like that's like, I think is a core leadership quality, is to recognize that like one person's mind only has so much potential, but like everybody's minds, if the one that can tap everybody's minds and get the resource in everybody's mind and put it in like a shared stack, like a bowl, and go, okay, so this is what everybody's minds is producing. This is going to be the best idea, because then it's like, so it involves having the prudence to be able to see whose idea is the best without your ideas being on that list. If that makes sense. Everybody thinks that to be a leader, you've got to have the best idea. I don't think that's leadership. I think that's a different quality. I think the leader is the one that my ideas like aren't relevant. Let's see what everybody's ideas are, and then present everybody's ideas in such a way that you can take them apart, and then you become not the one with an idea, but the one that sculpts everybody's ideas into one idea. That's not really your idea. It's like everybody else's ideas. And that idea then becomes like, that's true democracy, isn't it? And that's what I think that's what we need from a leader in order for everybody to feel heard, in order for everybody to feel valued, in order for everybody to feel like there's not a rule being made by this person who's going to make a rule that we all have to follow, right? Like a king or a queen or something. But we all get to be a part of what rules do we want. And when everybody's a part of how we live, then you're less likely to have people wanting to go against the system. Does that make sense? Because then we're all part of the system. Like, it's not us against the system that's imposed on us. We get to be a part of that system and how it works, like literally. And I think that's the idea behind democracy. Unfortunately, though, the dollar got in the way.
Yeah, I think a leader as well is somebody who gets the bow from the blue, the matter, the feminine, and the arrow from the masculine, the red, the fire. Gets the bow and the arrow from both sides, and sees the target and shoots. And then that's the eye, the third eye, no con. Like, forget icons. It's about the I, which is the I, which meaning the all as well. The I and I, the me and you. But I think it's about getting both sides and then seeing the target and then bringing them together, which is the opposite of what we're seeing at the moment. It's more of like a free for all, this side or that side. It's like you need to take, like you were saying, all ideas and having like a common goal, I guess. Not a new world order or a one world government, but a trajectory where we're going.
Yeah, I like what you said about the icon. That's a good synthesis right there. Sacredism.
They definitely conned us.
Yeah.
There's definitely a con running.
Yeah.
And the con has got to do with the eye on the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And they want to fill our vision with their eye. Please do continue, brother.
I was going to say, I've got a saying. It's I did a talk a little while ago, and this was the heading. Is what is it? No, it was our souls have been corrupted by arseholes, I think. But it was about archons, which is like our con. I've forgotten what I was going to say. Sorry, I've forgotten what I was gonna add to that then.
Talk about the archons, though.
Too many thoughts. Can't remember what I was going to originally say. I can't remember how that related. Sorry.
Just to talk about Sophia Pistis a little more.
It was to do with the icon, and then to do with like the our con, and then how that is our con is like having rulers outside of ourselves.
Absolutely. That is the big con, that we need direction because we can't think for ourselves.